Welcome back. The time is now 60 minutes past 7. The government has this week revealed major reforms for the rental sector, which are aimed at boosting investment to increase the supply of homes.
Joining us now to discuss these changes and the impact they will have is housing spokesperson for Sinn Féin and TD for Dublin Midwest, Eoin O'Brien. Good morning to you,
Eoin.
Thanks for having me.
You must be delighted with the policy yesterday. This is brought in to protect existing renters and look to bring investment into the country to try and boost housing. Sinn Féin, everything you're asking for.
If only that was the case, I'd be enthusiastically supporting it. The problem is that's not actually what the proposed package is going to do. What most renters want to know is what's the impact going to be on me. And in real terms, when these new rules are introduced from March of next year for tens of thousands of renters, it's not just going to mean increased rents, but rent increasing at a greater or more accelerated rate than before. The first group of people who are going to be immediately affected are movers, people who move out of one property and move into another, and there are tens of thousands of those every year. And they're going to face a situation where when they move into a new rental from March of next year, they're going to be hit with market rents immediately and then market rents at the end of 6 years. Students in particular who are moving in and out of properties will be very affected by that as well. And then as this new supply, which we've been told about, comes on stream, and I'm not convinced that that's going to happen, the renters in that new supply will be paying even higher rents again, which is going to drag rents up for everybody. So this is really, really bad news for renters. They're being punished for bad government policy on the promise of future supply, and that future supply is in great doubt.
We have to talk, of course, supply and demand. As it is at the moment, there is not enough supply. The demand is absolutely huge. It's not being met, and we've got so many secret homeless, not only the ridiculous homeless figures, but you've been calling for the whole country to be a rent pressure zone for years. They have essentially done that. Everywhere is going to be a rent pressure zone. Let's leave aside what's happening with the brand new bills that we're hoping are going to come online. So you've got to be happy with that policy, that they have acknowledged there is no place in this country that isn't in an emergency housing situation.
Well, first of all, there's about 17% of renters who are outside rent pressure zones, and the government is saying they're going to bring them in. The first problem is they haven't said when, and it looks like it might be 10 months. So that puts all of those renters right now at even greater risk of their landlords jacking up the rent even more in anticipation of the rent pressure zones. But the second thing is, if you completely gut the meaning of a rent pressure zone, if you allow landlords to reset the rent to full market rent, which in some cases will double the rent burden at the start of a 6-year tenancy and at the end, then you're not giving those people the protections that people previously had in the rent pressure zones. So essentially this is the de facto end of rent pressure zones. For some people it will come quickly, for others it will take more time, but it will mean over a short number of years the vast majority of renters will be paying full market rent, and that rent will be 2,000, 2,500, here in Dublin 3,000 to 3,500 euros a month. But that is not protecting renters.
This is the hope that in 6 years' time that a lot of this investment will come in, that the supply of apartments and potential housing will ramp up, which means that the pressure for rent will not be as high. So the market rate won't be as big a jump as we are seeing at the moment. Like, the government have had to try to do something. You've asked for them to introduce rent pressure zones all across the country. The maximum is 2% our interest of inflation. They can't really do much more than this, while also trying to attract this investment into the country to ramp up building.
Well, first of all, renters should not have to pay extortionate rents to fix the problems created by this government.
But they
themselves.
are having to, because that is the market rate at the moment, because there is a shortage.
They are, because government aren't protecting them. So, for example, here's what government should have done. Government, in the first instance, should have prevented rent increases. They should have also put far more money back in renters' pockets to reduce the burden.
There would be no landlords.
Absolutely not, because what the government should have done on top of that is dramatically increased investment in and delivery, not just of social homes. A third of all private renters should be in social housing, but also affordable rental and affordable purchase homes for working people. They have missed all of their social and affordable housing targets over the last number of years, and that's putting huge pressure. On top of that, vast numbers of renters do not want to be renters. They want to buy their own homes. And again, government is not working with builders, and particularly the small and medium-sized builder-developer sector, to get more good-quality homes built in every county in Ireland and more moderated prices. See these institutional investors that they're talking about?
Yeah.
They're only going to build very, very expensive rental in inner city parts of Dublin and parts of Sandymount. What about people everywhere else in the country? They need social, affordable or private for purchase homes, and the government isn't doing that. So here's the consequence. From March next year, renters will pay ever greater levels of rent, while government fails to deliver social, affordable and private for purchase. And I don't believe we're going to get the volume of private rental supply that the government thinks. So renters are essentially having their fortunes gambled by government. huge increases in rents next year, the year after that, in the promise of supply that many commentators don't think is even going to come into our system.
With institutional investors, obviously this is, they're the big bad wolf. We're kind of sitting there, they're building buy-to-lets and all this kind of stuff. But also, landlords have to some extent been demonised within this country. And these are landlords who might own an extra property that they're hoping for their child. We're looking at now, if you've got 3 properties, you're a small landlord. If you've got 4 or more, you're now considered a bigger landlord. You're also paying your income tax. You're taxed at a completely different rates to what these institutional investors aren't paying any tax towards us at all. Should we not be looking towards smaller landlords going, OK, you own a house near a college and kind of giving them more tax relief? Like, do you think we need to spend more time looking at them as well? Because people own houses. It's as simple as that.
For sure. And look, I've sat in almost every housing debate in the Dáil for almost a decade. And people don't demonise single property landlords. People criticise government policy. It is already the case that single property landlords get very, very significant tax reliefs. They get 100% mortgage interest relief as well as that.
But could we not
they
be
bring
treating
huge investment into the country. At the moment, the government is spending, 6 to 8 billion on housing at the minute. It needs to be 20 billion a year. The government can't afford to do that. They need to reach the targets of 50,000 houses per year.
Absolutely.
The government can't do that. They need to bring this institutional money into the country to do it. I mean, at the moment, last year in March, 1,816 apartments were built. This year in March, 160. So the government are trying to do what they can to bring this money in to ramp up building.
A few things. First of all, we need more public sector investment for social and affordable homes, and we need more private sector investment, particularly for homes for working people to buy. So nobody's disputing that. The government isn't spending €7 billion on the delivery of social and affordable homes each year. They're spending...
No, they're having to do it to build apartments. They're having to build houses.
Absolutely not.
They're having to spread the net.
They're spending about half of that. So the issue is, what kind of investment to deliver what kind of homes? So that's the debate. And what the government are saying is their preference is to give ever-increasing rents and increasing levels of tax breaks, because you're 100% correct. The big institutional investors pay no tax on their rent roll. They pay no capital gains tax if they're structured in the right way. So ever-increasing sweetheart deals to big institutional investors. All they are delivering is the most expensive rental accommodation. Look at some of the new institutional investment properties here in Dublin, €4,000 to €4,500. Meanwhile, everybody else is left behind. We've set out in great detail last September a comprehensive strategy showing where we would get the public and private sector money to deliver the public and private sector homes that people need.
A lot of people have question marks over the costings in relation to that, because they're sitting there going, OK, so you want to build houses that the state will actually own the land, but then there's legal difficulties with all these sort of issues. Because no one's disagreeing that, unfortunately, we do need this private investment to come into the country. You've said that yourselves. And when it comes to your plan or your costing, people are going, how are we ramping up this costing in this country to build that amount of social houses?
But I think
for people who are middle incomes.
I think a lot has changed since the election, because people have actually realised the government deliberately misled them during that election, saying they were doing things which in the end it was clear that they weren't. What we actually need is tens of thousands of genuinely affordable homes that working people can rent or buy. They're not getting that under the current government. They're not going to get that under the package of measures outlined yesterday. And I would encourage people, listen to what we're saying in terms of how we would increase investment in the public and the private sector to deliver more social, affordable rental, genuinely affordable purchase homes, as well as private homes. But let's be very, very clear.
What do you think that is? The market rate now is... The market rate, I was looking at something the other day, someone said, oh, that house must be about 400 grand. It was 800.
And
how do we do that?
Where I live in Clondalkin, and there's new homes being built there at the moment, a starter home is now costing €500,000. Yeah. That's where an entire generation of young people are being forced to emigrate or live at home with their parents. And you've got a growing issue of people approaching pension age in a private rental sector, which is too expensive and too insecure. So the idea that a small number of high-end, high-price institutional investors who can forever increase rents beyond the levels they're at is a solution to the housing crisis simply makes no sense. And I think the vast majority of people know that.
The number of houses and apartments hits the limit where we need to get to, there won't be the demand. So the level of rent won't keep increasing at the rate that it's going at the minute, because the supply will be there.
But the big challenge here is on the back of what the government announced yesterday, are we going to see a flood of institutional investment all over the country, building tens of thousands of apartments to do that? The straight answer is no, we are not, because Outside of the southeast inner city and Sandymount and other places, institutional investors don't invest. Who builds those homes? Small and medium-sized builder developers for people to buy, local authorities and AHBs for social and affordable homes. The government isn't doing enough on that side to meet that demand. And that means, other than in high-demand areas, what was announced yesterday is going to result in one thing and one thing only: ever-increasing rents on working people who can't afford it, on students, on single parents, on single or dual-income families who are already at the pin of their collar because of the cost of living crisis. This is a recipe for failure. And how do we know? Because Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have been in government for a decade, and we know what happens when they're in charge of housing. They make it worse.
Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have been in government for so long, and a lot of these policies you're saying they're wrongdoing. But according to all polls, it's Mary LouMcDonald who remains the least popular leader. Does that say a lot about where your policies and ideas are in trying to be the opposition to a government that you say is failing, but your own leader is the least popular out there?
Well, what I'd say is what's really interesting about the opinion polls since the election is Sinn Féin has regained a significant amount of ground and is either level 2 or ahead of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Obviously, the party approval leader ratings are important, but there's actually not much of a difference between them. I think what people want to know is what are your solutions? Because it's very easy for me to come in here and criticise a government policy.
This has been for years.
It has, but
there's been lack of clarity from Sinn Féin.
I don't believe that at all. If you look at housing, we are the only party who, before the election, published a comprehensive, multi-annual, fully costed plan. Yes, we can debate the details of that plan, and that's no problem whatsoever. Contrast that to the government. The government told people day in, day out during the election that 40,000 new build homes would have been delivered last year.
But talking about your party connecting with the people of Ireland, do you think Mary Lou is still the right person to lead in Sinn Féin?
Absolutely. And I think what you're going to see over the next period of time, right across the state, is more and more people realising they were sold a pup, they will have buyer's regret from the last election, and they will start looking at the real alternatives. And if you're a renter right now, the choice is this: Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, who will jack up your rent more and more and more, or Sinn Féin, who will protect you from rent increases and activate the public and private sector supply that's needed to tackle this housing crisis once and for all. And on top of that, we have a government that is cutting vital funding for homeless services and homeless prevention schemes at a time when child homelessness is going through the roof. And young people and people approaching pension age who need genuinely affordable homes to rent or buy to meet their needs will get them under Sinn Féin. They're not getting them under this government after a decade. They're not going to get them over the next number of years.
0896 111 111 to respond to what Eoin is saying this morning. Just very quickly, people are talking about, when we've got people inside here, the presidency is something that's going to be come up. Sinn Féin has cleared the way by the High Court jury for Gerry Adams, in fact, to run for the Oireas. Where do you stand on that?
I don't think Gerry Adams has any interest or intention of putting his name forward. The party's looking at our options at the moment. Do we stand a candidate of our own? Do we work with other progressive and like-minded parties to stand a unity candidate? We're consulting with the party membership, and we'll let people know of our decision over the course of the summer. The presidential election is quite some time away yet. We take it very seriously, but it's right that we consult with the party members before we make a final decision on the approach.
Eoin Broin, Sinn Féin TD and spokesperson for housing, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Right.